Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. This afternoon I thought I'd speak a little bit about the Brahma Viharas. And we had a question about whether metta actually affects people or not, and I put that off because I wanted to talk about something else last week, but we'll kind of address that as well. The Brahma Viharas, or the divine abidings, also called the boundless states, are 4 in number: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. And another name that could be given them is the skillful emotions. There's a saying somewhere in the canon that the wise person always dwells in the Brahma Viharas, which means the emotional base or state of the mind is only wise and skillful when it's in one of the 4 Brahma Viharas. All other states are to some degree unskillful in any other emotional base. Some degree or another. Metta is the first of these, and it's the most general, and to some degree the others are specialized. Metta is a general state of wishing well or benevolence upon beings. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings be free of fear, free of enmity, etc. So it's first of all important to understand what this is and what it is not. It doesn't having metta for beings, and one should have metta for all beings in all directions, in the 10 directions and the 3 times, and all the 33 realms and the all varieties of beings, without exception. But it does not mean that if you have metta for a being, it doesn't mean you approve of them or like them even, or definitely doesn't mean you necessarily want to be associated with them or hang around with them. I like to give the example of one of the Parita chants that we would often do in the jungle in Thailand. But Paritas are protective chants, and this, we called it, the Western monks, we nicknamed it the creepy crawly chant. It begins by wishing metta to the 4 kingdoms of snakes, and then goes on to may all beings with 4 legs, with 2 legs, with 6 legs, with 8 legs, with many legs, or with no legs, may they all be well and happy. And then it lists a bunch of them, like scorpions and snakes and spiders. But then it's the line, may you be well and happy, but may you stay away from me. So you want the scorpion, you have metta for the scorpion. You want him to be happy in this little scorpion world, but you don't want him crawling in your sleeping bag for a cuddle. It's not, there's quite a distinction in metta. The opposite of metta is wishing harm. So whenever your mind goes to, oh, I hope he falls down, I hope something bad happens to him, then that's very unskillful. It's the opposite of metta. All of these states can be developed as a meditation, and it's recommended to take it up from time to time, especially as a counter to states of anger and so on. And there are many benefits. There's a list in the Surimaga of the 18 benefits of metta. It says, one who practices metta is beloved by human beings and by non-human beings. He sleeps easily, wakes easily, and dreams no evil dreams. So practice of Brahma Viharas is a good way of preventing unpleasant dreams, nightmares, by taking on metta. It's also said that one who develops metta to a very high level cannot be hurt by weapons or poison or fire. And there's a number of stories in the Surimaga about people who develop high jhana states in metta and miraculously survive all various kinds of attacks and things. Now, whether you want to take that literally or not, there's plenty of incidents both in modern times and olden times of someone who has metta essentially disarm the wrongdoer. They lose their will to hurt you if you're just generating metta. And this is the case with wild animals, for example. Many stories of the monks in Thailand being confronted with a tiger or some other ferocious animal and just practicing metta, and the animal goes away. There's also stories about human assailants who become pacified just by being confronted with metta. So metta can be, any of the Brahma Viharas can be developed as a meditation, and there are many variations and ways of doing that. I think the important thing in general to bear in mind with any practice of the Brahma Viharas as a meditation is that the actual object of the meditation is the feeling state, and that we use visualizations or recitations and so on to rouse up that feeling state. Well, so I know some people I've talked to, they try to practice metta and they get kind of caught in just repeating the phrases from as a mantra, and it's not as effective as, you use those phrases or you use visualizations, whatever works, to get that feeling going, and then that feeling is the object. And there are two approaches. Both of them have their specific kind of strength and be used at different times. One is developing a Brahma Vihara towards specific objects. That's a more concentrated form of meditation. It's kind of more rigorous. And that is done traditionally by going through a list in the mind, beginning with yourself. May I be well and happy. And that's very important. That's not to be neglected. That's the first step, and it's extremely important that you establish that feeling genuinely towards yourself. And in a physical sense, the physical base is the center of the chest, the heart chakra. So if you center your consciousness there and begin with this earnest aspiration or wish, may I be well and happy. May I be free of fear. May I be free of enmity. And then whatever phrases you find useful, until you get that feeling really going, really glowing in there. Don't move on. Develop it there first. If you can't develop metta towards yourself, you can't develop it towards anyone else. It's not going to be genuine metta. You have to start with yourself. Then you start with yourself, and then you go through the list. And the traditional list is as follows. After oneself, you extend metta to someone you regard as a teacher, then to your parents if they're still alive, otherwise you skip that stage, then to a dear friend, then to a neutral person, then to an enemy. Someone, the enemy means someone who's caused you trouble, or when they come to your mind, you feel some hostility towards them. So you're going from the good friend, the neutral person, the enemy, from a very easy case to a very hard case. And the meditation is considered perfected when there's no difference in the feeling between the three. Because for this exercise, you're selecting specific objects, so specific individuals, like someone you know, or for the neutral person, you can at least summon up their face. Maybe it's someone you just had a brief interaction with in the store or something, but you don't either like them or dislike them. They're just a person. But in any case, you have specific objects, and the Visuddhimagga cautions that you avoid certain classes of beings for this exercise. One, you never extend metta to a dead person, and the reason being, if they are in the ghost realm, the radiation of metta will attract them, and they'll hang around, and they might cause you trouble, and it doesn't help them. It kind of gets them stuck in their existence. So for dead people, you do merit making. You don't extend metta. The other class of being to avoid is anyone who's of the, let's say, appropriate age and or gender type that it might arouse sexual desire in you. You avoid that because the metta can then turn easily into lust. So you avoid that in that instance. And I'll tell a little anecdote why sometimes in modern times it might be necessary to add a third category. One of our monks told a story that he was sitting in an airport waiting to change planes, and the security cops came around with a sniffer dog, and the monk was sitting there and he was passing his time by practicing metta, and he offered metta to the sniffer dog, and the dog actually came over and nuzzled him. so the cops are like, okay, you come with us. so also avoid dope sniffing dogs. So that partially answers your question about, does radiating metta have an effect on others? And I think generally it does. I think there's something to it, because we have all these incidents of people who are hostile or violent being pacified just by the radiation of metta. And there's numerous people have experienced that once they start developing metta, then other people start treating them with more kindness. It's coming back at you. There's a Tibetan idea, or teaching, for what it's worth, that the radiation of metta is not only beneficial, it's necessary. That if there was ever a time when there wasn't at least one yogi somewhere radiating metta, the whole universe would descend into chaos. It's the only thing holding the universe together, keeping some semblance of order. The other way of developing Brahma Viharas is called general pervasion. So instead of specific objects, you're sending metta out to all beings everywhere without exception, all categories in all directions. And the general way of doing that is, again, to begin with yourself. That's always the first step and always very important. And then to put it out in expanding circles. So if we were doing it now, you would begin with yourself, then to everyone sitting here, and then extend it out to the property and whatever animals are around. And also include invisible beings, any ghosts or dewas, or any other beings that might be around. And you don't have to worry about those excluded categories here because you're not focusing on individuals. You're sending it generally outwards. And you send it out in gradually increasing circles and trying to include all beings of all kinds, great and small, animals, human, invisible beings, until you're radiating it out to all directions of space, whatever unknown, unimaginably vast number of beings there are in the whole cosmos. Radiating metta from your heart center out into the infinite reaches of space, you know, kind of blessing all beings, washing over all beings with this. May you all be well and happy. Now, a couple of things about doing it this way that I think are helpful. One is that I think there are at least a couple of natural stopping points where you can stop and just hold it for a while. One is when you have it to the whole continent. It's like to the limits of ocean sea. So it would be like North America. You're radiating metta from here to all of North America. And then the other one is the whole planet, the whole Earth. And then you stop there and just contemplate the whole Earth, and then you spread it out into space. Another thing is if you do this, the mature meditation is radiating to infinity. You hold that for as long as you can. But then before you emerge from the meditation, you should collapse it back. You can go much quicker, but bring it back by stages to smaller and smaller circles until you're back to your own self and holding at the heart chakra for a few breaths before you end the meditation. So you've grounded yourself again. You're not spaced out when you leave the meditation. There's a variation of this practice that you can take it from the universal radiation, you can take it into the formless abidings. So I'm radiating metta to the four corners of space, and I hold that for a while. Then I cease to pay attention to metta, and I just pay attention to boundless space. And then my consciousness is filling boundless space, and I cease to pay attention to space, and then I'm in the base of boundless consciousness. Then I cease to pay attention to consciousness, and I abide in nothingness. And then you cease to pay attention even to nothingness. That's even too busy for you. And you rest in neither perception nor non-perception, the most subtle of the formless states, the most subtle state that's still within the conditioned existence. So that's a variation. You can take it from there. The next two Brahma Viharas, Karuna and Mudita, are variations on the theme. They're similar to Metta, except they're more specialized. Karuna specializes on the suffering of beings, and Mudita on the joyfulness of beings. So Karuna is the earnest wish or aspiration, may beings be freed from suffering. It can be practiced the same way as Metta, with the same two variations. The thing to watch out for here is that Karuna, which is often translated as compassion, the word compassion in English is slightly misleading here because compassion means to suffer with. That's the literal breakdown of the roots of the word, to suffer with. Whereas Karuna should not make you feel suffering. If it does, you're not doing it right. You're wishing beings not suffer. There's no skill, there's no benefit to self or other to experience vicarious suffering. It's sort of a natural human response that we fall into. We see someone suffering, we feel sad for them. But that's not karuna. Karuna is the wish that they not suffer. You think of it this way: if you suffer vicariously, you're not helping, you're only adding to the total sum of suffering in the world by taking some on unnecessarily. You know? Karuna can be a motivator for action, and we can act in the world out of karuna to help relieve suffering, and we should when we have the opportunity and when it's beneficial. But in itself, it's not an action, it's a mental state. It can be the motivator for action, but it can be just a mental state like metta. But instead of wishing well, you wish not suffer. It's kind of a specialty, so narrower than metta. And then mudita is the opposite. It's recognizing the happiness of beings, the joyful experience of beings, and may they continue to enjoy this happiness. Because except probably for the very lowest depth of hell realms, every being in samsara has some mix of pleasure and pain. So there's going to be some happiness of beings, and may they continue to enjoy their happiness. And of course, there are different kinds of happiness. There's happiness derived from the five senses, and there's happiness derived from jhana, and there's the supreme happiness of nibbana, and there's all kind of variations. But we're not particularly thinking here of any kind of elevated form of happiness. We're just thinking of being happy and content. And in fact, the example given in the Visuddhimagga is very worldly. When they're describing mudita, they say that a poor man sees a rich man going by on a decorated elephant, and instead of feeling envy or jealousy or resentment, he thinks, oh, he's enjoying this happiness. May he continue to enjoy such happiness. So it's the opposite of envy, or as we were talking about the other day, Schadenfreude. You're not. If you have that state of mind where you're feeling envy or you want someone else to lose their happiness, then that's the opposite of mudita. Then the fourth state is upekkha, and that's kind of different than the rest. It's on a higher level, and the Visuddhimagga treats it as kind of the graduate school of Brahma Viharas. You have to have mastery of one of the others before you can approach upekkha. I think that's a bit extreme. I think it's worth developing right from the beginning, some degree of upekkha. Upekkha has a lot of different, it has, one meaning and many meanings. It's equanimity, but there's 18 kinds of upekkha, depending on context. For example, the upekkha developed in insight meditation is upekkha towards dhammas, is the clear, non-reactive observation of phenomena. Then there's upekkha as a feeling tone, as neutral feelings, equanimous, neither happy nor sad, but just neutral. But here we're talking about upekkha as a divine abiding, is upekkha directed towards persons or beings. And that means one recognizes some aspect of all beings that's universal. There's obviously all kinds of ways in which beings differ. There's different classes of beings. There's humans and devas and animals. Within the sense-desire realm, there's different genders. There are different capacities of strength and intelligence and other things. There's multiple ways in which beings differ, but there's some essential way in which they're all the same. And the traditional way of identifying this is that they are all the products of their karma. They're all just, in whatever these multitude of different ways that they manifest, that's all results of karma. and everyone's subject to that. That's very true, but it's a bit abstract and theoretical, a little difficult to really make it, real to yourself. There's another contemplation that I heard suggested by the Dalai Lama in a recorded talk of his I listened to, is developing upekkha by contemplating with each being. This being just wants happiness, doesn't want suffering. That's something that's equal and universal in all beings. They just want happiness, don't want suffering. If you take that as the kind of the contemplation, it breaks down the differences between beings, and you kind of see them all the same. I found a kind of a playful way of using it is if I'm being driven in a car on a highway, I'll just kind of flash on the faces of the people in the cars coming by and have that contemplation. And you see all kinds of different people, men and women and children and old and young and, you know, different races and different economic status, and, you know, and just being just wants happiness, doesn't want suffering. And you kind of break down all the differences, then become kind of just window dressing. This is the essential core. Yeah. There's another related contemplation to this. It also kind of focuses on the same thing. It's another playful kind of contemplation. This is one that Kema taught. If you're in a place where there's like crowds of people, like you're waiting in the subway or you're on the street or whatever, and just kind of take in the crowd and you run this mantra in your mind. You're a Buddha, they're a Buddha, everywhere a Buddha, Buddha. I'm a Buddha, you're a Buddha, everyone's a Buddha, Buddha. Yeah. In the essence, with these upekkha contemplations, whichever variation you use, you're trying to raise up this sense of this, the universality of consciousness, of suffering, of karma, that, all beings manifest all kinds of variations. They're all variations on a theme. They're all coming out from, the same sort of place. So I think I'll stop there. That's a kind of a brief rundown on the four Brahma Viharas.